So we've done the best high schools in Sydney, Melbourne, and Queensland, but if you're a parent in Melbourne watching this looking for the best primary schools, well, we know how overwhelming of a process that can be. Maybe you're staying up late scraping reviews and information on school websites, or even stalking Facebook groups, asking random parents what they think is the best school. But there's actually a better way to go about things, because nobody mentions that 49 out of the top 100 primary schools in Melbourne are actually public schools, which means that the
"you need to pay $30,000 a year for a good private education" narrative
is completely false. So in the next few minutes, I'll exactly break down Melbourne's 2025 primary school rankings based on NAPLAN results and the real differences between public and private primary schools in Melbourne. But something parents often overlook is prioritizing a school's ranking rather than looking at what school actually suits and fits their child's needs. And so if you want to avoid this mistake, stick around to the end of the video where I explain how you can do so. Anyway, let's get into things by looking at Melbourne's top primary school rankings first. Okay, so based on the 2023 NAPLAN results, here were Melbourne's top primary schools. So the best private primary school was PLC, and the top public primary school was Wheelers Hill Primary, which ranked number 8 overall. You then had Serpil Primary that ranked number 9, whilst Oakley South Primary School finished number 10. So as mentioned before, 49 out of the top 100 primary schools in Melbourne are actually public schools, which is almost half. So the assumption that private education equals better academics isn't necessarily cleanly backed up by the data. I have to admit though that private schools do dominate the top 10 rankings. Specifically, the first 7 schools are private primary schools. Your child could still attend a high-performing public school like Wheelers Hill or Serpil Public School and get an education that maybe rivals and even in some cases beats the private schools that are charging, $30,000 plus a year. What I'd recommend doing is comparing NAPLAN results in public schools within your catchment zone to private primary schools that you're considering. And if academics is something that you are prioritizing at the very most, then you might find that public schools in your area can actually be of better educational value, if not the same as private education. And so you can save a lot of money by making that comparison. The next section will touch on some of the unique advantages private primary schools have over the public school system. So we'll get into that now. All right, so if academics isn't always the differentiator, then what are you actually paying for when you attend a private primary school? Well, there's usually 2 things: class size and extracurriculars. So let's look at class sizes. So private schools tend to have smaller classes because not everyone can afford private education, but they also have a lot more teachers for any given faculty or specific subject. And so what ends up happening is you have a lot more smaller classes. And smaller classes means better one-on-one attention from your teachers. So if your child is someone who needs that extra support or prefers a learning environment where they can freely and directly ask questions without feeling lost in a bigger classroom, then that's a learning preference you have to take into consideration when comparing private and public schools. Now, when it comes to extracurriculars, we know that private schools tend to have more funds, and therefore those funds can generally mean more resources put towards infrastructure and facilities to meet a diverse set of interests and extracurricular activities for students. Now, it doesn't mean that public schools don't have these things. It's just that private schools can cater to more students at greater scale compared to a public school. So if your child is very passionate about a specific interest, maybe it's music, maybe it's a particular sport, it's likely that a private education will allow them to explore that interest in great depth without feeling excluded. Whereas in a public school setting, sometimes exclusivity can kick in because there's not enough resources to cater to every single child. And so a good question to ask yourself at this point is, does your child need the extra attention and the wider range of programs a private school offers? Or are they the kind of kid who will thrive in a well-performing public school with strong academics and a solid community? Because if your local public school is in the top 100 and you don't require all the bells and whistles that come with a private education, then you're potentially going to be looking at saving a lot of money whilst still being able to achieve a very similar academic outcome. This video here actually provides a very simple and clear decision-making framework that you can use to actually choose what school would be best for your child. I'll link the video in the description, and I'd highly recommend checking it out after watching this one. All right, so remember at the start of this video, I talked about this idea of how parents often overlook prioritizing a school's ranking or academic performance rather than looking at whether a school actually fits their child's needs. Well, here is exactly what I'm talking about. So when choosing a school for the first time, you have to remember that you're actually choosing a foundation of how your child sees and experiences learning, which will be super important when they actually transition to high school. Because what actually matters long-term is not what specific school your child attended, but rather if they can leave that primary school feeling curious, confident, and well supported. And so it's not a game of trying to find the best school with the best academic performance and the highest ranking, but rather finding a school that genuinely is able to cater to your child's interests and needs. So I've actually put together a checklist of a few simple questions you can go through when looking at what schools to explore further. And so some of the questions in this checklist include, does the school celebrate your child's strengths, not just academic results? Will your child feel safe asking for help here? Do the teachers seem genuinely engaged or just going through the motions? And can your child see themselves fitting in with the other kids? A lot of these decisions will be made by you, but they can be largely informed by talking to parents and students that are currently engaging in those schools or schools that you're interested in sending your child to. Look, choosing a primary school in Melbourne feels like one of those decisions that's heavier than it actually needs to be, because the truth is Melbourne has some incredible primary schools, both public and private. And so the real question isn't about which school ranks higher or which one is better, but rather which one actually fits your child, your family, and your specific situation. Other than that, I hope you really found this video helpful in searching for the so-called best primary school, and I look forward to catching you in the next video.